Did you know that long before encrypted emails and disappearing messages, powerful women were risking their lives to send secrets? How did medieval queens surrounded by spies and treachery whisper crucial information across vast kingdoms without anyone knowing? From the grand courts of the 1100s to the quiet chambers of the 1400s, these queens were masters of covert communication. Number 12. The substitution cipher. Chill wind of a late autumn evening in 1327 swept through the royal apartments of Queen Isabella of France, known to many as the She-Wolf of France. Her chamber, usually a hub of activity and court gossip, was quiet save for the scratching of a quill on parchment. Isabella, a woman of sharp intellect and even sharper ambition, bent over a letter, her brow furrowed in concentration. This was no ordinary correspondence. It was a message destined for her allies in England, a crucial update on her plans against her estranged husband, King Edward II. Betrayal lurked in every shadow, and loyalty was as fleeting as the morning mist. A simple letter could be intercepted, its contents laid bare for prying eyes. This is where the substitution cipher, a method as old as empires but still profoundly effective, came into play. Isabella knew that the most common form of a substitution cipher was a simple shift where each letter in the alphabet was moved a certain number of places down. For instance, A might become D, become E, and so on. But such a basic shift was easily broken by even a moderately skilled clerk. Isabella's chosen cipher, a more complex variant, used a randomly jumbled alphabet as its key. Her alphabet, known only to her and her most trusted recipient, was not a simple shift, but a completely new arrangement of letters. For example, A might be Q, B might be Z, and C might be %. This was the core of its strength. Without the specific key, the message would appear as a jumbled collection of meaningless symbols. The queen dipped her quill, her movements precise. The message she intended to send was straightforward yet devastating in its implications. The king is weak, his favorites drain the coffers. Prepare for our arrival. To a conventional reader, this would be a death sentence if discovered. But Isabella wrote carefully, each letter being transformed by her unique code. The T of the became a G, the H, an R, and so on. Slowly, the treasonous words transformed into a string of seemingly random characters. G, R, V, N, L, Q, J, L, V, G, P, K, L, V, Idaruv, Gudaluv, Suzdu, I, R, U, R, X, U, Du, Lido. This was just an example of a simple shift. Isabella's real key was far more intricate, a scrambled sequence of letters she had devised herself and committed to memory. She worked in silence, her hand moving with a practiced rhythm. Every word, every phrase was carefully considered, then translated into the secret language. The process was slow, painstaking, and demanded absolute concentration. A single misplaced letter, a moment of distraction, could render the entire message unintelligible to the recipient. Or worse, reveal its true nature to an enemy cryptographer. Once finished, the parchment held no obvious clues. It looked like a foreign inscription, or perhaps a meaningless scribble to anyone not privy to the secret. Texture of the parchment, made from fine calf skin, was smooth beneath her fingertips. The ink, a rich dark gall ink, dried quickly. The true genius of this method lay not just in the complex key, but in its management. Isabella kept her personal cipher key, a small piece of parchment, with the two alphabets neatly aligned, hidden within the false bottom of a jeweled casket, a place she knew no one would dare search her recipient. Roger Mortimer possessed an identical key. Challenge was ensuring that the key itself never fell into the wrong hands. Messengers were instructed to memorize portions of the key or carry it on their person in such a way that it could be swiftly destroyed if they were captured. The burning of a small piece of parchment, the crumbling of a wax tablet. These were common methods. The risks associated with this type of code were immense. If the key were discovered, all past and future communications using that key would be compromised. The entire network of spies and allies could be exposed, leading to arrests, torture, and executions. Isabella understood this gamble. She had to trust her messengers implicitly, and she had to be certain that Mortimer, across the channel, would guard his copy of the key with his life. Historians often speak of the she-wolf of France as a ruthless political operator, and her use of such advanced Krukenakov methods for her time but through strategic brilliance. Once the letter was coded, it was folded and sealed with her personal signet ring, a piece of silver bearing her unique crest, pressed into warm wax. This seal, while not a part of the code itself, served as an additional layer of authentication, a mark of authenticity that told the recipient the letter truly came from her even if the words within were indecipherable to others. The messenger chosen for this perilous task was a trusted member of her household. Disguised as a merchant, he would carry the letter sewn into the lining of his tunic beneath his simple woolen cloak, his journey fraught with the danger of bandits, suspicious border guards, and the ever-present threat of royal spies. Loyal to her husband, the journey across the channel was often perilous. Storms could delay ships, and even clear weather could bring the danger of piracy. The messenger would have to navigate towns teeming with soldiers and inns filled with gossips. His life depended on his ability to blend in, to appear unremarkable, and to deliver his cryptic cargo without arousing suspicion. Upon arrival, the messenger would hand the sealed letter to Mortimer. In a private chamber, away from prying eyes, Mortimer would retrieve his own key. He would then, letter by letter, painstakingly decode Isabella's message, transforming the jumbled string of characters back into the stark reality of her intentions. The information within this single-coded letter could sway the course of a rebellion, change the succession of a throne, and determine the fate of a kingdom. This was the power of the substitution cipher in the hands of a medieval queen. Number 11. Invisible ink. The year was 1464, and the Wars of the Roses raged across England. Queen Margaret of Anjou, a fierce and relentless figure, found herself in a desperate struggle to regain the throne for her Lancastrian husband, King Henry VI. She was often on the move, leading armies, negotiating alliances, and constantly aware that every communication was a potential trap. Spies were everywhere, and an intercepted letter could mean ruin. In such a high-stakes environment, the ancient art of invisible ink became her clandestine ally. The concept of invisible ink was deceptively simple, yet remarkably effective for its time. It relied on substances that would leave no visible mark on parchment when wet, but would reveal their presence when exposed to heat or certain chemical reactions. Margaret, ever resourceful, favored materials that were readily available and easily dismissed. As harmless, one common substance was lemon juice. Another was milk. Both left no obvious residue on dried parchment, especially if applied sparingly and allowed to dry completely. A letter written with plain water over a dried invisible message could pass off as innocent correspondence, its true purpose hidden beneath the surface. Margaret would often dictate a seemingly mundane letter to a trusted scribe, perhaps discussing trivial court matters or family news. This letter, written in standard iron gall ink, would serve as the decoy, the cover text. Once this seemingly innocuous letter was finished and dried, the queen herself would take a fresh quill, or sometimes even a fine-pointed stick, and dip it into a small, inconspicuous bowl of lemon juice. With painstaking care, she would write her true secret message between the lines of the visible text, or sometimes on the reverse side of the parchment, where it appeared blank. The secret message might be an urgent plea for reinforcements from Scottish allies, a coded instruction to a loyal commander, or a warning about an approaching enemy force. Reinforcements needed urgently at Hexham. She might write the words, forming a faint, almost imperceptible sheen on the parchment as the lemon juice dried. Key was a light hand and patience, allowing each application to dry thoroughly so that no telltale dampness or faint residue remained. Parchment itself, often made from cured animal skin, was absorbent enough to take the invisible ink without too much bleeding. The method for revealing the message was equally simple, relying on the properties of the chosen ink. For lemon juice, the recipient would carefully hold the parchment over a gentle heat. Source, perhaps, a candle flame, a warm brazier, or even a hot stone. As the lemon juice warmed, the faint acids in it would oxidize and darken, turning the invisible words into a visible brownish script. The trick was to apply just enough heat to reveal the message without scorching the precious parchment or accidentally setting it alight. A common mistake for the inexperienced. For milk, the process was similar. The heat would cause the milk proteins to burn slightly, revealing the hidden words. The danger of this method was not just the potential for the letter to be discovered, but for the method of revealing it to be known. If an enemy suspected invisible ink, they might systematically expose all intercepted correspondence to heat. Thus, the choice of messenger and the discretion of the recipient were paramount. Margaret would only entrust such sensitive letters to couriers she knew intimately, individuals who had proven their loyalty time and again through years of service and shared hardship. These messengers would be given explicit instructions on how to reveal the hidden text, often verbally, never in writing. One particular instance, often recounted by those close to her court, involved a message sent to her half-brother John Beaufort. The visible letter was a request for a new hunting falcon, a mundane detail meant to lull any interceptors into a false sense of security. Hidden within its blank spaces was a desperate call for funds, and troops specifying a precise rendezvous point and a time-sensitive plan to ambush a Yorkist detachment. The messenger carried the letter for days, enduring harsh weather and dangerous roads. Upon reaching Beaufort's camp, the parchment was held over a small fire, and slowly the hidden words began to emerge, transforming a seemingly trivial request into a critical military directive. The beauty of invisible ink was its low technological barrier. It didn't require complex machinery or rare chemicals. It leveraged everyday substances, making it difficult for an enemy to trace its origins or prevent its use. Yet its simplicity belied its effectiveness, allowing queens, like Margaret of Anjou, to weave vital information into the very fabric of innocent correspondence, maintaining communication networks, essential for their survival. The very act of revealing the words felt like a magical unveiling, pulling secrets from the void, a testament to the ingenuity of those who refused to be silent. Number 10. Acrostics and nomenclatures. The refined court of Eleanor of Aquitaine in the 1170s, a place of poets, troubadours, and scholars, might seem an unlikely setting for covert communication. Yet beneath the surface of artistic expression and intellectual pursuits, schemes and political machinations constantly churned. Eleanor, a woman of formidable intelligence and influence, twice a queen and a mother to kings, often found herself in situations where discretion was not just preferred, but essential. She used acrostics and specific nomenclatures or word codes to send messages right under the noses of those who might suspect her. An acrostic is a form of writing where the first letter of each line, or sometimes the last, spells out a word or phrase. It's a literary device, often used for poetic flair or as a mnemonic, but in the hands of a clever queen it became a potent tool for secrecy. Eleanor, known for her patronage of the arts, would commission or even write poems and songs that, on the surface, were expressions of courtly love or philosophical musings. But for those in the know, a hidden message would be patiently spelled out. Love's sweet pain, a burden I gladly bear, longing for the moment when we share immortal bliss beyond all earthly care, out of my sight. Yet ever in my prayer, no other love could ever compare, reveals rebellion. To the casual reader, it's a beautiful, if somewhat conventional piece of poetry. To the intended recipient, it's a shocking, undeniable call to action. The skill lay in crafting a poem that flowed naturally, did not sound forced, and still delivered the secret message. Complexity of the verse itself often served as a distraction, making it less likely that a casual observer would bother to deconstruct its hidden meaning. Beyond acrostics, Eleanor also employed a system of nomenclatures or coded word usage. This wasn't a cipher in the traditional sense, but rather an agreement with a specific recipient to assign new secret meanings to common words or phrases. For instance, in a seemingly innocent letter discussing a recent hunt, the phrase, "The white hart was sighted near the old oak," might secretly mean the Norman forces are gathering near the border. The word falcon might refer to a specific General Hawthorne, to a particular stronghold, and winter's chill to a coming political upheaval. The challenge with nomenclature was memory and consistency. Both sender and receiver had to precisely recall the agreed-upon code word. This was often managed through shared experiences, a specific shared book, where certain words were marked, or even a unique, often repeated, inside joke that served as a key. This type of code was highly secure if the key was never written down and only known to a very small, trusted circle. The very act of creating and using such a system deepened the bond of trust between Eleanor and her allies. One tale speaks of Eleanor using a coded song lyric to warn her son, Richard the Lionheart, of a plot against him while he was on crusade. A minstrel, seemingly performing a new ballad, would sing a verse that to the uninitiated was about a jilted lover, but for Richard, who knew the nomenclature, a specific phrase within the song revealed a warning about a treacherous count and a planned ambush. The beauty of this method was its public nature. A song could be sung in court, a poem recited, without anyone outside the conspiratorial circle being the wiser. The risks, of course, were that the coded words could be misinterpreted, or that the system could be accidentally revealed through careless conversation. There was no physical evidence of the code, which was both a strength and a weakness. It prevented discovery, but also left no record to confirm the message's intent. Despite these challenges, such methods allowed Eleanor to maintain subtle communication networks, influencing politics and safeguarding her interests from behind the scenes, all while maintaining an outward appearance of cultural refinement. Her court, renowned for its intellectual prowess, provided the perfect cover for such intricate mental games of espionage. This blend of artistry and subterfuge was a hallmark of her era and her own formidable character. Number 9. Symbolic embroidery and tapestries. The early 15th century was a time of intricate politics and alliances. Margaret of Anjou's daughter-in-law, Anne Neville, later Queen of England, found herself in a precarious position, her loyalties often divided between powerful factions. In an era where courtly life revolved around appearances and social rituals, even seemingly innocent crafts like embroidery and tapestry weaving could become vehicles for profound secrets. Anne, a keen needlewoman, herself understood the power of symbols woven into fabric, a silent language understood only by those initiated into its meaning. Embroidery and tapestry were not just decorative arts in the medieval period. They were rich with symbolism. Every flower, every animal, every color, every arrangement held potential meaning. Queen, confined to her chambers and often surrounded by watchful ladies-in-waiting who might be spies, could not openly send written messages without immense risk. But a piece of needlework displayed openly or gifted was beyond suspicion. It was a domestic art, an expression of piety or skill. Anne would agree upon specific motifs and their meanings with her trusted network. For example, a rose might represent the House of Lancaster, while a white rose clearly signified the House of York. But the subtleties ran deeper. A red rose with a broken stem could mean Lancaster is wounded. A white rose entangled with thistles might denote Yorkist alliance with Scotland is problematic. The direction a lion faced, the number of leaves on a particular plant, the specific shade of a color, all could be coded. A large tapestry commissioned for a grand hall depicting a hunting scene might have a subtle, unusual detail. Perhaps a small, almost hidden bird, known to be a symbol of a particular noble family, was depicted flying away from a castle, signifying that that family was withdrawing support or abandoning. A position, tiny, almost imperceptible knot of a specific color or a particular stitch pattern, repeated in an unusual sequence, within a larger pattern, could be the key. The very slowness of tapestry creation, sometimes taking years, allowed for the gradual layering of messages, each thread a secret whispered into the loom. For personal, urgent messages, smaller embroidered items were used. A scarf, a handkerchief, a piece of clothing sent as a gift to an ally. Anne might embroider a small, delicate flower, perhaps a violet, which traditionally symbolized loyalty. But if it had a specific number of petals, or a unique leaf configuration, it could mean loyalty remains. But danger is near. A series of distinct knots in the fringe of a mantle, or a specific count of pearls on a sleeve, could represent a coded number or sequence. The challenge was standardization and interpretation. Coded language of symbols had to be meticulously agreed upon beforehand. A small illustrated book detailing the symbols and their meanings might be created and held by only the sender and receiver, hidden in a secure location. This codebook was itself a dangerous object, and its discovery would expose the entire communication network. Anne would sometimes dictate the designs to her most trusted ladies who, unknowingly or knowingly, would execute the coded patterns. One documented example, though not directly tied to a specific queen, is the Bayeux Tapestry, a historical record woven in fabric. While not a secret code, it demonstrates how much information, narrative, and symbolism could be conveyed through needlework in the medieval period. Queens certainly understood this capacity and adapted it for clandestine purposes. The risk of symbolic embroidery was misinterpretation. A hurried glance, a poor light, or a slight deviation in the pattern could lead to a catastrophic misunderstanding, but the advantage was its inherent invisibility as a message. Who would suspect a beautiful piece of artwork of carrying treasonous information? It was the perfect disguise for a subtle operator. Queens, who often found themselves in positions of limited direct power, had to resort to such indirect, covert means to influence events. By transforming the domestic arts into instruments of espionage, they proved their resourcefulness and strategic depth, weaving their will into the very threads of courtly life. Number 8. Jewelry and gemstone codes. In the opulent court of Queen Eleanor of Castile, consort to King Edward I of England, in the late 13th century, jewelry was more than mere adornments. It was a display of wealth, status, and sometimes a clandestine medium for secret messages. Eleanor, a Spanish princess by birth, brought with her a sophisticated understanding of European courtly practices and a sharp political mind. When navigating the complex relationships between England, France, and her native Castile, she found subtle ways to communicate, and her magnificent collection of jewels provided the perfect cover. The concept was simple, yet ingenious. Assign meaning to specific gemstones, their cuts, their settings, and their arrangement. This required a prearranged code known only to the sender and recipient. For example, a sapphire might signify loyalty, a ruby, danger, an emerald, hope, and a pearl peace, or a truce. The very number of stones, their position on a necklace or ring, or the way they were presented, could convey complex phrases. A common method involved rings, H unique, She might send a seemingly innocuous gift of a ring to a trusted ally or relative. The ring itself, or the way it was worn, could be the message. For instance, a ring with 3 rubies and 1 pearl worn on the index finger might mean 3 dangers, 1 hope of peace. The number and type of gems, their specific sequence, even the hand or finger on which the ring was worn, could all be part of the complex code. A ring with a hidden compartment designed to hold a tiny, rolled-up parchment also served a similar purpose, but the gemstone code was far more subtle, existing in plain sight. Necklaces offered even greater possibilities for intricate messages. A long string of beads and jewels could be a series of letters or numbers, each specific gem representing a letter of the alphabet or a numerical value. Pattern of alternating emeralds and diamonds might represent E and D, for Edward is approaching. Type of clasp, the length of the necklace, or even the way it was draped, could also be part of the message. Imagine a queen carefully assembling a necklace, not for its beauty alone, but for the information it would silently convey. Trusted lady-in-waiting might then be instructed to deliver the piece of jewelry, perhaps as a gift, or simply to wear it when visiting a specific person. The beauty of gemstone codes lay in their visual nature. They didn't require deciphering a jumbled text or holding parchment over a flame. The message was displayed openly yet invisibly to all who saw it, save for the one individual who held the key to its meaning. The recipient would observe the jewelry, mentally translating the configuration of stones into the intended message. This method was particularly useful for communicating with distant allies, as jewelry was a common item of exchange and gift-giving between royal courts. The challenges were numerous. First, the code had to be meticulously agreed upon and remembered. A small illustrated jewelry dictionary might exist, but its discovery would be catastrophic. Second, the cost of the ink was immense. Only a queen could afford to send messages composed of precious stones. Third, the message had to be concise. Complex sentences were impossible to convey through a limited number of gems. Thus, these codes were best suited for short, urgent directives, confirmations or warnings. Fleet sails, tomorrow. Alliance, confirmed, or betrayal, suspected. Eleanor, a woman of deep political acumen, used her influence and her personal wealth to forge alliances and maintain stability. Her use of jewelry as a covert communication tool highlights her ingenuity. She might send a piece of jewelry to her sister Queen Blanche of Castile, ostensibly a symbol of sisterly affection. But the specific arrangement of sapphires and pearls in the brooch, perhaps a certain number of sapphires signifying danger, and a single pearl retreat could convey a critical warning about the shifting political tides in England or France. The brooch would pass through various hands admired for its beauty, but its true message would remain hidden. A silent whisper across kingdoms, revealing itself only to the recipient. This transformation of adornment into espionage was a testament to the cunning and adaptability of medieval queens. Number 7. Hair braids and ribbons. In the mid-13th century, Queen Margaret of Provence, consort to King Louis IX of France, found herself living in an era where women's lives, even those of queens, were largely confined to the domestic sphere and courtly rituals. Yet, even within these constraints, Margaret, known for her sharp wit and political astuteness, found subtle ways to exert influence and communicate beyond the prying eyes of courtiers and spies. One such method involved the seemingly innocent arrangement of hair braids and the careful selection and placement of ribbons. In medieval courts, a lady's hair was often elaborately styled, braided, and adorned with ribbons, nets, and jewels. This was a common practice, a part of daily fashion and social presentation. Margaret exploited this custom by creating a subtle visual code with her most trusted ladies-in-waiting, or even with her own daughters. The code relied on pre-arranged meanings, assigned to specific numbers of braids, their positions, the color of ribbons used, and the pattern in which they were tied. For instance, A particular number of small braids intertwined with larger ones could signify a numerical value or a letter. 3 small braids on the left side of the head might mean 3 or C. 5 on the right could mean 5 or E. Combination of numbers of braids and their placement could spell out short words or signal specific instructions. The direction of a single braid, whether it's swept forward or back, could also be part of the code indicating yes or no, or a warning. Ribbons made of silk or linen offered another layer of complexity. Color of a ribbon held symbolic meaning in the medieval period, but these meanings could be secretly reassigned. A red ribbon, usually signifying passion, could be recoded to mean danger approaching. A blue ribbon, typically associated with loyalty or truce, might mean alliance confirmed. The position of the ribbon tied around a braid woven into the hairnet, or simply held in the hand, could further refine the message. A red ribbon tied high on the head might mean immediate danger, while a red ribbon woven into a lower braid might mean danger, but manageable. This method was particularly useful for communicating within the confines of the court itself, often in plain view during banquets, religious services, or daily audiences. Queen could glance at a lady in waiting's carefully arranged hair and instantly glean crucial information without exchanging a single word. A lady in waiting attending to the Queen could subtly adjust her hair or ribbons, conveying a message back to the Queen or to another trusted recipient across the room. The challenges were obvious. The message had to be short, often a single word or a simple instruction. Code had to be memorized by all parties, and any new additions to the code had to be communicated verbally and discreetly. Misinterpretation was a significant risk. A slight shift in a braid or a ribbon could lead to a misunderstanding. Furthermore, it relied on the recipient being able to observe the hair arrangement without drawing suspicion. One famous story, though possibly apocryphal but illustrating the plausible use of such methods, suggests a queen used this method to communicate with her ladies during a tense court event where she suspected a plot against her. A specific braid pattern, perhaps 2 intertwined braids on one side and a single one on the other, might signify, "Do not speak of the treaty," while a simple, unadorned braid could mean, "Proceed with the plan." The ladies would then subtly adjust their own hair in response, a silent dialogue unfolding amidst the pomp and ceremony of the court. The true strength of hair and ribbon codes was their ability to be changed quickly and subtly. A ribbon could be untied, a braid redone in a matter of moments, erasing the message without leaving any trace. This ephemeral nature made it incredibly difficult for spies to detect or intercept. For a queen like Margaret, who needed to manage her household, negotiate with her husband, and sometimes even counter his advisors, these silent visual codes offered a lifeline of communication, allowing her to weave threads of influence and knowledge into the very fabric of her daily life at court. It was a testament to how medieval women, even in restricted circumstances, found ways to assert their agency and transmit vital information. Number 6. Musical notation codes. The Renaissance bloomed in the 15th century, fostering an explosion of artistic expression, particularly in music. Isabella of Castile, a queen who would become one of the most powerful rulers in European history, was a shrewd patron of the arts, and she understood that music, often performed openly in her court, could serve as a cloak for secret messages. In an era where her actions were constantly scrutinized and where alliances and betrayals shifted like desert sands, a code hidden within a melody or a piece of sheet music was an invaluable asset. The core idea was to assign specific meanings to musical elements that would go unnoticed by the untrained ear or the casual observer. This could involve assigning letters of the alphabet to specific notes, the length of pauses between notes, the number of repetitions of a phrase, or even the subtle variations in rhythm or tempo. One method involved assigning letters to the musical scale, For example, C could be A, D could be B, E could be C, and so on. A melodic line, when performed, would then spell out words. A song could be composed, seemingly a simple love ballad or a devotional hymn, but its underlying musical sequence would carry a different hidden meaning. Imagine a court musician, in the presence of the queen and her advisors, playing a seemingly innocent tune. But to Isabella and her chosen recipient, the sequence of notes, perhaps subtle changes in the melody line or specific sustained notes, would convey a critical message. Attack at dawn. Another method involved numerical values. Each note or even a specific interval between notes could represent a number. These numbers could then be part of a prearranged numerical code, where each number stood for a word or a phrase. For example, a perfect fifth interval might mean reinforcements, while a major third could mean enemy approaching. Complexity of the music itself, with its counterpoints and harmonies, would act as a natural camouflage for these simple numerical sequences. The physical sheet music itself could also contain hidden codes. A subtle marking on a particular note, a slight alteration to a clef, or even an almost invisible symbol written near a bar line could convey information. These markings would be so minute that they would appear as imperfections or random scribbles to anyone unfamiliar with the specific code. The parchment made from cured animal skin would be durable enough to withstand such fine markings. The ink, often a dark gall ink, would blend in, making the hidden marks even harder to detect. Isabella of Castile often communicated with her loyal commander, Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba, particularly during the Granada War. She might send him a new piece of music, ostensibly a gift for his entertainment during long campaigns. Within the score, a specific pattern of rests or the repetition of a specific melodic phrase might encode instructions for troop movements or a change in strategy. The musician tasked with delivering the sheet music would be utterly unaware of its true significance, making him a secure, unwitting messenger. The challenges were numerous. First, the recipient had to be musically literate or have a trusted musician who could interpret the code. Second, the code had to be meticulously prepared and memorized or shared via a highly secure musical dictionary that would be incredibly dangerous if discovered. Third, the message had to be concise. Complex narratives were difficult to embed within musical notation without making the music sound strange or unnatural, thus attracting unwanted attention. Despite these challenges, musical notation codes were highly effective because they were non-verbal and existed in plain sight. They were performed openly, creating a layer of plausible deniability. Who would suspect a beautiful madrigal or a solemn motet of harboring espionage? This method allowed queens like Isabella to weave their commands and warnings into the very cultural fabric of their courts, orchestrating not just the harmony of notes, but the movements of armies and the fate of kingdoms, all while appearing to simply enjoy a pleasant evening of entertainment. The subtle power of a hidden melody, understood only by a select few, was a potent weapon in the hands of a discerning medieval queen. Number 5. False bottoms and hidden compartments. The reign of Catherine de Valois, Queen of England, in the early 15th century was marked by political instability and the ongoing 100 Years' War. As a French princess married into the English royal family, her position was often delicate, and she frequently found herself needing to communicate discreetly with her family in France, or with various factions within England. In such an environment, the use of objects with false bottoms and hidden compartments became an ingenious way to transport secret messages and small vital items. This method relied on the everyday objects found in a medieval court: wooden chests, jewelry boxes, books, reliquaries, and even simple wooden panels in a chamber. Craftsmen, loyal to the queen or bribed for their silence, would subtly modify these items, creating secret spaces that were almost impossible to detect by casual inspection. Common example involved a small, beautifully carved wooden chest, perhaps used for holding a lady's personal effects or small treasures. Craftsmen would construct a thin, removable panel at the bottom or along one side, secured by a tiny, almost invisible latch or a clever sliding mechanism that required precise knowledge to open. Within this space, a rolled-up parchment containing a secret message, a small drawing, or even a tiny vial of poison, though unlikely for a queen to send but possible for others, could be hidden. Chest would then be filled with everyday items, ribbons, dried flowers, small religious trinkets, making it appear entirely innocent. Books, prized possessions in the medieval era, were another favored vessel. The binding of a large leather-bound volume could be hollowed out, or a section of its pages carefully cut to create a cavity. The book would then be placed back on a shelf, appearing indistinguishable from its untouched counterparts. A religious text often carried by travelers was particularly effective. A messenger, acting as a scholar or a devout pilgrim, could carry such a book, unaware of its true contents, or, if trusted with explicit instructions on how to access the hidden compartment. Catherine de Valois, often caught between English and French interests, might have used a carved prayer box, outwardly displaying devotional imagery. Inside, a hidden panel could conceal letters to her family about English troop movements or pleas for support from French nobles. The box would be delivered as a pious gift, its true purpose utterly concealed. The art of the craftsmen who created these hidden spaces was crucial. They had to be virtually undetectable, resisting casual handling or even careful scrutiny from someone not explicitly looking for them. The precision needed to make a seamless fit, to match the grain of the wood, or to disguise the hinges or latches was immense. The risks associated with this method were primarily discovery. If the hidden compartment were found, the entire scheme would unravel, and the queen and her network would be exposed. However, the very nature of these objects, their often beautiful craftsmanship, and their apparent harmlessness, made them less likely to be subjected to intense scrutiny. A chest of linens would rarely be dismantled by a guard searching for spies. One plausible scenario involves a small wooden chessboard, a common game in medieval courts. Craftsmen could create a false bottom that, when slid open, revealed a cavity perfect for a tightly folded message. Such a chessboard could be sent as a gift between nobles, or carried by a courier disguised as a merchant, playing the game with strangers in inns, to avoid suspicion, all the while carrying critical intelligence beneath the very pieces of the game. The objects themselves became an extension of the message, traveling in plain sight, their true significance hidden within their physical structure. For queens like Catherine de Valois, who operated in a world where overt actions were dangerous, these subtle methods of communication provided a vital lifeline. They transformed mundane objects into instruments of intrigue, allowing them to bypass traditional channels of communication and transmit vital information, all while maintaining an outward facade of courtly propriety. The silent journey of a hidden compartment, carrying secrets across kingdoms, was a testament to the ingenuity born of necessity in medieval espionage. Number 4. Coded gestures and body language. In the turbulent late 15th century, Queen Elizabeth Woodville, consort to King Edward IV, navigated a court rife with suspicion and political maneuvering. As a commoner who married a king, she faced constant scrutiny and envy. Her communications needed to be exceptionally discreet, especially when dealing with her network of loyalists or subtly influencing the king. In such an environment, where spoken words could easily be overheard or misinterpreted by enemies, coded gestures and body language became an essential, unwritten language of power and survival. This method relied on the prearranged assignment of meaning to subtle everyday movements or expressions. It required acute observation from the recipient and incredible discipline from the sender to execute these gestures naturally and without drawing undue attention. It was primarily used for face-to-face communication within a small, trusted circle, often in public settings, where overt conversation was impossible. A simple gesture like touching a specific piece of jewelry, a subtle nod, a particular way of holding a fan, or even the precise angle of a bow or a curtsy could carry a message. For instance, touching a ring on the left hand might mean proceed with caution, while touching a necklace might mean the path is clear. A specific hand placement, perhaps, the way fingers rested on a goblet, could signal danger is present or confirm the meeting. Tilt of the head, the shifting of gaze, or even the duration of eye contact could convey approval, disapproval, or a warning. Elizabeth Woodville, known for her beauty and her strong will, would have employed these methods regularly, particularly when communicating with her family or her staunchest supporters during court gatherings, feasts, or religious ceremony. In a room full of hundreds, where every conversation was potentially monitored, a glance, a specific posture, or a subtle movement of the hand could convey a wealth of information to an alert recipient. She might subtly adjust the sleeves of her gown, a particular tug indicating disagree with him, or a smoothing motion meaning support his claim. The recipient, often a trusted lady-in-waiting, a brother, or a loyal knight, would be trained to observe these minute details. Their eyes would constantly scan the Queen's movements, searching for the pre-agreed signals. The success of this code depended entirely on the discretion and observational skills of both parties. The gestures had to be integrated patting into the natural flow of courtly interaction, making them indistinguishable from ordinary movements. One specific instance, though not directly documented for Elizabeth Woodville, but entirely plausible, might involve her interacting with a key supporter during a formal audience. While the king spoke, perhaps discussing a proposed marriage alliance, Elizabeth might subtly adjust her elaborate headwear in a prearranged way, a specific touch to avail, perhaps signaling do not agree to this match. The supporter, observing her without seeming to do so, would then know how to react in the subsequent discussion, subtly undermining the proposal without ever directly contradicting the king. The challenges of this method were numerous. It required absolute precision and perfect memory from both sides. There was no written record of the code, which prevented discovery, but also risked miscommunication. Complex messages were impossible to convey. These codes were best suited for short, urgent directives, confirmations, or warnings. Yes. No. Danger. Proceed. Wait. Agree. Disagree. Despite these limitations, coded gestures and body language were incredibly effective because they left no tangible trace. They were ephemeral, existing only in the moment of their transmission, making them almost impossible to intercept or prove. For queens like Elizabeth Woodville, whose very presence at court was a source of tension, and who needed to operate with utmost secrecy, these silent signals provided a crucial means of communication, allowing them to exert influence and safeguard their interests in a world where a single misstep could mean ruin. The power of a whispered secret, unseen and unheard, lay in the precise movement of a hand, or the subtle shift of an eye. Number 3. The poison ring cipher, secret compartment rings. While the term poison ring often conjures images of lethal substances in the context of medieval queens, it more commonly refers to rings with tiny, cleverly concealed compartments. These rings, while occasionally used for poisons, were far more frequently employed as discreet carriers for miniature, rolled-up messages, or small, precious objects. In the 12th century, Queen Berengaria of Navarre, consort to Richard the Lionheart, a queen often separated from her husband by crusades and political turmoil, would have found such a device invaluable. These rings were exquisite pieces of craftsmanship, often fashioned from gold or silver, adorned with gemstones, and designed to appear as mere items of fashion. Their secret lay in a hinged top, often disguised as part of the gem setting, or a false base that with a subtle twist or press would reveal a minuscule cavity. The opening mechanism was usually so intricate that only someone with prior knowledge could unlock it. The process of using such a ring for a secret message was painstaking. A message would be written on the thinnest possible sliver of parchment or vellum using a finely sharpened quill and extremely small script. The message had to be concise, perhaps a single word, a crucial number, or a tiny symbol. It would then be tightly rolled or folded into a miniature scroll, no larger than a grain of rice, and carefully inserted into the ring's hidden compartment. The top would then be meticulously closed, rendering the ring outwardly indistinguishable from any other piece of jewelry. Berengaria, often traveling across Europe to join Richard or returning to her homeland, might use such a ring to send a critical piece of intelligence to a trusted emissary or family member. Perhaps a warning about a rival's movements or a confirmation of an alliance. She might send the ring as a gift, ostensibly a token of affection or remembrance. The recipient, knowing its true purpose, would then retrieve the message in a private moment. Imagine Berengaria, during a particularly fraught period of negotiations, needing to send a quick, unambiguous directive to a loyal knight. She would retrieve a ring seemingly an ordinary piece with an ornate setting and carefully open the hidden catch. She would insert a tiny message, perhaps "Flee east" or "Proceed," written on a minuscule scroll. The ring would then be passed to the knight, perhaps as a small reward for a task, or simply worn by a trusted messenger who was unaware of its contents. The very smallness of the message was a double-edged sword. It severely limited the amount of information that could be conveyed, but it also made the message itself incredibly difficult to find if the ring were intercepted. The main risk lay in the discovery of the compartment. If a suspicious guard or spy examined the ring closely and discovered the mechor could be compromised. However, the everyday nature of rings, their constant presence on hands, made them less likely to be subjected to intense, meticulous searches compared to letters or documents. The true genius of the poison ring cipher for queens lay in its portability and its personal nature. It was a single contained unit of communication that could travel on the person without drawing suspicion. It bypassed traditional channels of communication, which were often riddled with spies and prone to interception. While the historical documentation of specific queens using these rings for messages is sparse, their existence and their potential use in medieval espionage are well documented. They represent the ingenuity of individuals who leveraged every available means to communicate in a treacherous world. For queens like Berengaria, who had to navigate political landscapes as dangerous as any battlefield, such a discreet tool provided a quiet yet potent means of asserting her will and protecting her integral at a time. Number 2. Messengers' memory codes. In the early 14th century, Queen Philippa of Hainaut, consort to King Edward III of England, was a queen celebrated for her intelligence, compassion, and political acumen. Her reign saw periods of intense Anglo-French conflict, requiring swift and utterly secure communication in an era before widespread literacy and with the constant threat of intercepted letters. One of the most secure methods of transmitting vital intelligence relied not on ink or parchment, but on the human mind. The messenger's memory code. This method involved imparting a message verbally to a trusted messenger who would then commit it to memory and deliver it orally to the recipient. The code part came in when the message was particularly sensitive or complex, requiring a specific phrasing, a set of trigger words, or even a mnemonic device to ensure accurate recall and delivery and to prevent its true meaning from being understood by an accidental eavesdropper. For the most sensitive intelligence, a queen like Philippa would often phrase the message in a seemingly innocuous way. For example, "The new flock of sheep is ready for shearing. Their wool will be excellent this year," might actually mean, "The French fleet is prepared for invasion. They are vulnerable to attack." The messenger would be given the true meaning of the seemingly harmless words, effectively turning them into a living cipher. The words themselves were the code, and the messenger was the key. The training of such a messenger was paramount. They had to possess an exceptional memory, an unwavering loyalty, and the ability to maintain composure under interrogation. They would be drilled repeatedly on the exact phrasing of the message and its hidden meaning. Sometimes a long, winding story filled with seemingly irrelevant details would be concocted, within which the true message was buried like a needle in a haystack. Only the recipient, knowing the specific keywords or narrative cues, would be able to extract the vital information. Consider a scenario where Philippa needed to warn a distant general about a change in enemy tactics. She would summon her most trusted page, a young man known for his quick wit and photographic memory. She would tell him a lengthy, detailed story about a fictional hunting expedition describing specific animals, landscapes, and encounters. Within this narrative, certain animals might represent specific enemy commanders, and particular geographical features might symbolize strategic locations. The page would memorize this story verbatim. Upon reaching the general, the page would recount the story as if it were a simple tale. The general, knowing the code, would listen for the hidden meanings, extracting the precise military intelligence from the seemingly innocent narrative. The security of this method was its greatest strength. It left no physical trace. There was no letter to be intercepted, no cipher to be broken, no hidden compartment to be discovered. If the messenger was captured, they could claim complete ignorance, genuinely believing they were just delivering a story or a mundane message. The only risk was the messenger's own memory or their resolve under torture. For this reason, queens would often use multiple messengers, each carrying a different part of a larger message, or a series of confirmations, making it even harder to reconstruct the full intelligence if one fell. This method was particularly favored for high-stakes information that could not afford to be compromised. It was used for messages of war, peace negotiations, secret alliances, or warnings of assassination plots. The reliance on human memory and trust highlights the deeply personal nature of espionage in the medieval period. For queens like Philippa, who had to navigate the intricate web of European politics, the ability to send and receive information without leaving a single compromising shred of evidence was invaluable, solidifying their power and influence from behind the scenes. The silent journey of a secret, carried only in the mind, was a testament to the ingenuity born of necessity in a time of constant peril. Number 1. The sealed note trick. In the mid-14th century, Queen Joan of Navarre, consort to King Philip IV of France, was a woman of considerable political influence and a keen understanding of courtly intrigue. As a ruler of both France and Navarre, she faced a constant barrage of information, much of it sensitive, and the ever-present risk of spies and interceptors. In this environment, even a seemingly innocuous document could become a vehicle for secret communication. The sealed note trick, a deceptively simple yet highly effective method, allowed her to embed hidden messages within plain sight. The core of this trick involved sending a seemingly legitimate letter or document that contained a visible, harmless message. However, the true secret message was in code, not in the words themselves, but in some subtle, often unnoticed detail of the document's presentation, folding, or sealing. It relied on a pre-arranged agreement with the recipient, turning an ordinary missive into a clandestine one. One common application involved specific folds of the parchment. A letter might be folded in a particular sequence, perhaps a certain number of times in one direction, then another, or in a specific pattern unique to the code. A seemingly standard letter of invitation or administrative instruction might be folded 3 times vertically and then 2 times horizontally, a pattern that to the recipient meant danger at court, or proceed with the alliance. The very act of folding a letter was so commonplace that no one would ever suspect it held a secret. Another subtle method involved the placement of the wax seal. A royal seal pressed into hot wax typically served to authenticate the sender and secure the letter. However, a specific prearranged placement of the seal, perhaps slightly off-center, or with a tiny, almost imperceptible mark made by a fingernail or a unique tool near its edge, could convey a crucial message. For instance, a seal placed slightly to the left could mean expect resistance, while one placed higher than usual might mean victory is assured. These minor deviations would be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them, and easily dismissed as a slight imperfection in the sealing process. Queen Joan might send a letter to her steward, ostensibly discussing the management of a royal estate. The visible text would be mundane, but the specific way the parchment was folded, creating a unique pattern of creases, would convey a hidden instruction for the steward to prepare for a clandestine meeting with a loyal knight or to subtly divert funds for a secret purpose. The letter would pass through numerous hands, scribes, pages, messengers, all of whom would see only a standard piece of correspondence, sealed and legitimate. The advantage of this method was its inherent simplicity and the complete lack of suspicious elements. No special ink, no complex ciphers, no hidden compartments. The message was woven into the very form of the communication. The risks were minimal, primarily relying on the recipient noticing the subtle detail and remembering the pre-arranged code. Misinterpretation was a possibility, but because the message was usually a simple confirmation or directive, the context often helped clarify any ambiguity. This method was particularly useful for sending confirmation messages or for conveying simple yes or no answers without risking detailed written communication. Queen might send a letter confirming the receipt of goods, but the subtle angle of the seal, known only to her trusted ally, would actually confirm her agreement to a dangerous political maneuver. The parchment itself, made from cured animal skin, provided a durable surface for such precise folding and sealing. For queens like Joan of Navarre, who operated in a world where every action was scrutinized, the sealed note trick was a testament to their resourcefulness. It allowed them to communicate vital information without ever committing a compromising word to paper, using the very conventions of medieval correspondence against the prying eyes of their enemies. The silent message of a perfectly placed crease or an off-center seal was a quiet declaration of power, allowing queens to weave their will into the invisible spaces of their daily lives.